Episode 12, 2011. We shall not fail. If we stand firm, we shall not fail. Wise counsels may accelerate or mistakes delay it, but sooner or later, the victory is sure to come.
Now, on Inside the Buffalo...
Wait! Can't use that title. How about this? All right.
Folks, do we have a special episode of Down and Drought for you today? You know what the routine is. Every week we're going over a season of the Bills' 17-year playoff drought, going in depth on everything about the Buffalo Bills and their 17-year playoff absence. I'm Prescott Rossi. He's Thad Brown, and bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, bum, bum. By God, that's the Droughtcast music. Ryan Nagelhout sitting in with us. Ryan, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. This is exciting.
And you really are the inspiration for kind of everything drought-wise in Western New York this offseason. I remember it was right around Christmas hanging out with you and the defenseman. Are we still going by his alias?
Let's call him Corey Griswold. He's
he's been outed. His online alias has been outed. And you guys said, like, hey, we're going to do this idea of doing a podcast for every game of the Bills playoff drought. And explain to me how that idea came about and how the hell you execute something like that.
It was not my idea. I do want to state that because I don't want to be held responsible because it's not over yet and things could go terribly wrong.
Friendships could end.
Yeah. He was back in town and he said, "Here's an idea," and I immediately said yes. And then I said, "Wait, how many games is that?" And he's like, "It's 250 something." I was, "Oh, all right. Well, yeah. Let's do it anyway." And so so we started doing that. We record about 3 nights a week, and what you do is really great because it's palatable. You can handle this. Like, you will not need like psychiatric care afterwards. This is over. But
I don't know. There's some of these years that are pretty difficult.
Yeah, but every game is it's fun because we would, he was in Virginia at the time. He just recently moved back, and so now we can do them together and it'll be a lot more fun. But for a while that's how we would chat. In between, like, the Bills just getting destroyed by the Patriots or losing terribly in Chicago to a really good defense there, and like I'm learning a lot that I willingly forgot.
Well, and that's the thing is, I mean, you and I were kind of in the same boat. I was born in '87. You were what, '88? Yeah. So the drought happens while we're in middle school.
Yeah.
So like begins when we're in middle school, and our whole lives have taken place over the course of these 17 years, and just doing these game by game recaps and episodes. What have you learned about the Bills, and maybe even about yourself?
Oh boy, I was actually thinking about it on the drive here. I drove in from Niagara Falls. I was kind of trying to put the timeline together of, because you're ahead a couple years of where we are. We're just started the 2007 season. Kevin Everett just almost died, and the team is reeling from that. They got destroyed by the Patriots in Randy Moss, who just arrived there now. He'll still be around for a while.
Yeah,
but so I was in elementary school the last time the Bills made the playoffs, and just carried through all of that. Most of that time was me as a fan. Then I became a person in the media. This season is actually the first time I attended a Bills game as media, and it's wild to see how dystopian this has spiraled.
Yeah, it's scary, folks.
Yeah.
Let's bring it to not quite the present, because the focus this episode is 2011. And right at the start of 2011 is actually an event that doesn't involve the Bills, but it does involve their future owner. February 22nd, Terry Pegula buys the Sabres from Tom Golisano. And that is a franchise that was in their spiral out of trips to the conference finals. Was there any thought for you, Thad, covering the Bills and in the media in Western New York at the time, and for you, Ryan, living in Niagara Falls at the time, thinking that this could be the savior for the Bills a couple years down the road? Because Ralph is 92 at this point, and obviously we know the end is sooner than the beginning.
I don't think that was the immediate thought. I think that came soon after. I mean, immediately it was just, wow, here's an owner for the Sabres that really is going to care about winning the cup and stuff,
Yeah.
And because the previous owners have been about saving money, being economical, Tom Golisano, and one of the first things that Terry Pegula said in his press conference was, we're going to cut the chains. We're going to spend whatever it takes. And everyone was just excited about that, the thought of saving the Bills, although certainly on everyone's mind just about every day, in that specific moment wasn't quite then, but maybe within a few months later, whenever you talked about the Bills, it was, hey, why not the guy who owns the hockey team buy the football team too?
Starting today, the Buffalo Sabres' reason for existence be to win a Stanley Cup. There will be no financial mandates on the Buffalo Sabres hockey department.
Clarion call should go out to the league and to hockey players everywhere that Buffalo is hockey heaven. If you want to come somewhere and work for the best owner in the league, make some plans to come to Buffalo, because this is where it's going to happen.
It was certainly the next logical step, and that was what you would hear on talk radio. It was not. There were no. I mean, I think somebody even asked in the initial press conference about that, and he's like, no, that's not my thing. He's a hockey guy. He talked about how much he loved the Sabres and how much he
had seats in the red, red seats at the odd.
Gilbert Perreault showed up and he cried in the introductory press conference. He was very emotional about that team and didn't care about football at all because he didn't live here. Why would he? But people certainly hoped, because things were getting pretty dark when it comes to the ownership of the Buffalo Bills.
And at the very least, it was another option, and it was so dark that any option was a positive step.
And I know a lot of talk has been made about Western New York's economy and Buffalo being a Rust Belt city, but there are rich people in Western New York that could save the Bills when the time comes. Terry Pegula at this time is worth $4.7 billion.
Which is funny.
Which would be enough to buy the Bills. Now, the big story of the offseason in 2011 is a league-wide issue. Of course, it's the NFL lockout. Thad, what was it like, going into an offseason with that question mark looming, and then with the owners locking the players out and free agency? Who knows what's going to happen with the draft, and so many things now up in the air.
Not only was it weird because the lockout had stopped everything, but it wasn't like there was a lockout and then it was over. There was a lockout, and then the judge decided, well, now it's not a lockout, so players can come back and report. Well, then the lockout's back on again, and then there's a rumor that it won't be on. I mean, every day it was not only what are the rules during the lockout, but is the lockout still on? And then now that it's not on, what are the rules? And you had guys like Leotis McKelvin showed up at his team facility, and Russ Brandon said, sorry, you can't come in. I mean, it was that kind of thing all year. Guys were holding their own practices. That was the only time I don't think we attended an off-season workout, because you didn't know where they were going to be from week to week. So every day, every week was a new, what are the rules, what can the players do, what can't they do, and what are we going to cover today?
It was certainly one of the first lockouts I can remember of my life where it actually felt like they put chains on fences and you couldn't go places and players were trying to get in. When the NHL locked out, which it has done a whole bunch, it seems, it was very much, you could kind of comb through the CBA and say, these are the issues they have to address, and it was you could have focused on it really well and knew exactly what was going on. And like you said, with the NFL, it changed every day. And so I guess it was an exciting lockout in a sense, but also just very confusing for an average fan.
You also have to become a lawyer now.
Right.
Media and understanding, this allows antitrust lawsuits, and this judge says this and that. Now, I don't know how they were able to make it work, and it's not really worth diving into, but they are allowed to have the NFL draft. So no free agency of any kind, so who knows what these players' futures are. April 28th through the 30th, the Bills have the 3rd overall pick, and it's pretty obvious that Cam Newton's going to go number 1 to Carolina. Von Miller goes to Denver at number 2. Marcell Dareus, the defensive tackle out of Alabama, goes to the Bills. And, the thought of the Bills bringing in a major piece to anchor the middle of their defensive line.
The funny thing about this draft is that this might be the only draft, maybe I can remember, where you had that many picks that were, at the time, no-brainers in the way they would play out. And even looking back, if you drafted that draft again, no matter what teams were there, they would go in the same 3 picks. And on top of it, no one would be unhappy with who they got. All 3 guys have been bona fide stars. I think it took Dareus a little longer than Von Miller and Cam Newton. But at the time, the Bills' defense was so bad, and especially against the run. I mean, this was, although I'm sure they would have preferred, especially looking back, than when Cam Newton out of the draft.
Or J.J. Watt.
Well, yeah, but a different story. But in terms of, they probably would have preferred to have Von Miller too. But all things considered, their run D was so bad, coming up with a run stopper, an elite run stopper, which is what Marcell has turned out to be, is just fine.
We want a guy that's going to play as hard as he can every play, and he's one of them. He don't take plays off. He don't quit on the long chase. He gives you everything. You know what you're going to get every play.
As I said earlier, he is a force to be reckoned with. He is a big, strong, physical, athletic man, and I think that I think we got better today. We're better than we were at 8:08 tonight.
Everybody know my versatility. I can go out here and make it happen. I come off the ball hard. I got a quick step. Everybody asks me that. It's just overwhelming. I cannot explain the way I feel right now. overwhelmed, excited, joyful. It's a joyful occasion.
It definitely worked out. And I think there was a little bit of fear, I mean, with some fans, just because he's such an imposing force that people sort of thought like, well, they need a run stopper. He's perfect. Well, they needed an offensive lineman, and they were up that high, and they got Mike Williams, who was gigantic and perfect, and no, it didn't work out.
Right,
But thankfully it did.
It did. This was not a bust at all.
And doing the research for the 2011 draft, a lot of the articles I'm seeing are about, well, the Bills should look for a quarterback because we know what the ceiling is with Fitzpatrick. He obviously hasn't signed his big deal yet. So, the Bills should look at a quarterback, even if they don't get Cam Newton. Well, these are the other quarterbacks that go in the first round. Jake Locker, Blaine Gabbert, Christian Ponder.
Yes.
If that happens in Buffalo and they pass on Dareus, who becomes a Pro Bowl level defensive tackle with some other team, we've talked a lot about how the Bills have failed in the draft. This is one instance where, all right, here's your layup, and they got it done.
I don't think it changed me at all. When I say I want to be a pro, I want to be a pro on and off the field. And handle myself in the community, of course, back home, my brothers and sisters. And then when I do have kids, I want to handle myself, I want to be a pro around them. Let them know to set the example. Just because you have it and you done work for it don't mean you got to go out there and flaunt it and blow it all the way.
Second round pick, the Bills have pick number 34. They take a defensive back out of Texas, a man by the name of Aaron Williams. Terrence McGee, Leotis McKelvin, they're injury prone. Dante Whitner's a free agent, so what is his future with the team? The thoughts that in the second round they go with Aaron Williams over perhaps a quarterback because the following two picks are Andy Dalton and Colin Kaepernick.
Definitely the quarterback was discussed. I mean, Kaepernick wasn't a quarterback then.
Of course.
Then Kaepernick was a gadget player.
A guy from Nevada.
Exactly, yeah. Right, that too. But I don't think there's a problem with it, and Aaron Williams impressed pretty quick in camp. I mean, he looked good in camp. I liked him in camp better than Marcell that first year.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Aaron was fantastic in camp. Now, obviously, the careers have gone different directions. Injuries are part of it, but in that camp, I thought Aaron Williams was fantastic.
It seems like, it's a pick that they just keep addressing that same position over and over again. It's like the running back thing. They keep bringing in guys, and it's not that it didn't work out, but it's not a very inspiring pick in any way because you would have loved to see them, go after a quarterback maybe and have, Fitzpatrick obviously becomes a guy that they, that they think can be the long-term quarterback. But you would have liked, just to find the answer there would have been pretty great. And Andy Dalton shows up immediately, and that makes a lot of people upset.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
I mean, I know not to spoil things.
The third round pick is Kelvin Shepard, a linebacker out of LSU, and Chan Gailey says in the draft room in the media room after that pick that it was Kelvin Shepard's Senior Bowl showing that sold him on Kelvin Shepard. Well, one player who didn't go to the Senior Bowl and ends up going 2 picks later to Kansas City is Justin Houston, an all-pro linebacker. So, okay, that's not the worst miss of the drought.
And they do flip Kelvin Shepard into Hughes. So,
it all works out with Shepard, but if Justin Houston in the middle of that linebacking core would have been nice. Denora Searcy in the fourth round. 7 of the 9 Bills picks are on the defensive side of the ball, and you finally see them really addressing areas of concern. I know there were still others on the offensive side, but the defense was so poor in 2010. I would have to imagine the grades coming out of that draft in 2011 were very positive. Well, beyond Dareus.
Even beyond, it was. I don't know if it was very positive. I think it was moderately positive. But you look back at that draft, it was a really good draft. I mean, Dareus, and then Williams, and then Shepard, who, in my opinion, becomes Jerry Hughes.
Denora Searcy is a quality player.
Even Chris Harrison, a tackle, was a productive guy for a fifth-round pick. So, this draft, top to bottom, is a very, very good draft, especially by Bills drought standards.
I have nothing to add, but I'm going to ask you a question because that's what I do on my podcast.
You're not allowed to
ask you something.
Let me ask you something.
I'm going to hold you right there.
Last season in the timeline here, a lot of things happened in season, and there were a lot of retooling and just weird occasions, like things that happen. When this draft comes down, you're covering the team. Do you get the sense that they finally know the direction that they're going, that things are working in the right? Are they figuring it out?
With the moment Buddy Nix came on board, it felt that way. It felt like that you had a general manager with a football background, with a scouting background, with a guy who knows how to take a football team in a direction. Whether it's a positive direction, who knows? But this isn't Marv Levy, kind of, hey, I'm a figurehead and everybody loves me, or Rush Brandon.
I'm not retired, I'm retired.
Right, exactly, or Rush Brandon, who came up from the other side of the building, more or less. So, and I don't think the draft in particular, it's a general feeling that you didn't need underscored by the draft, but the draft does do that.
Okay.
Immediate aftermath of the draft, Wednesday, May 4th, and this is a move that the Bills do this year in real time.
Yeah.
Wednesday, May 4th, the Bills fire Tom Modrak as VP of College Scouting, and Modrak has recently passed away, but Thad, you've covered this team through the entire run of Modrak with a high position in the Bills front office. Your interactions with him, what were your thoughts of him? And it seemed like, he survived picks like Mike Williams, Lossman, McCargo, Maybin, Whitner, Hardy, the entire Donahoe era. It's kind of amazing that Modrak is still there. What did that say about him, that he was able to withstand all of that and still be there in 2011?
He only talked to us, for the draft luncheons. So we'd see him maybe once before the draft and maybe after the draft. And he was also always a secondary player on the dais, on the podium. So we didn't really deal with him much. Seemed like a decent guy. This wasn't like you'd hear backroom things about Tom Donahoe being terrible to all the staff. You never heard that about Tom Modrak. Very straightforward guy. And the fact that the story with that is, like you said, the fact that he was still there, to be fired after this draft, after all the other terrible drafts that he had already survived. And again, this one turns out to be pretty good. I mean, if the firing of the scouting staff after a draft works out as well with the 2017 draft as it did with 2011, then the Bills are going to be in good shape for a while here.
And then a couple days later, on May 6th, 2 days later, in fact, Doug Whaley's title goes from, and I want to make sure I get this right, Director of Pro Personnel to Director of Player Personnel. Yeah. There's a difference, folks. Basically, he now takes over Modrak's duty as college scouting director. He's going on the road more.
Yeah, he goes from just running the pro personnel, in other words, looking at free agents and guys who are out there in the league, to now he looks at that and the college guys too.
And you mentioned how when they hired Buddy Nix, how there was a feeling that, all right, this is a team that's acting like a football team. And now you're seeing Doug Whaley getting elevated to another position high in the front office. I would have to imagine that reaffirmed that feeling as well.
Again, when Doug Whaley was brought on board, and we said this in one of the last two podcasts whenever he was hired, that there was already a feeling he was the heir apparent at GM. And this just confirmed it, that he is progressing up the ladder, getting more responsibilities. Whenever Nix wants to step away, and Nix was no spring chicken, so we kind of figured it was closer than later that Whaley would be the guy, and this just again confirmed that.
Friday, June 24th, the Bills have new uniforms. The dark blues are gone. The away whites with the random blue shoulder pads are gone. They're going back to the royal blue. Just your thoughts, fellas, on this long overdue jersey switch.
There is such shame in those jerseys that they got rid of just now. Really, I mean, it's the worst. And it was a terrible look, and it's very much, it looked very sharp when Drew Bledsoe walked out on the field in sunglasses and is wearing them. And then fans just saw so much terrible mayhem with those jerseys and when they wore the throwbacks, it looked like it made sense. They still lost in them quite a bit, but it was exciting and people were up about it. It was such a logical choice for a team that it was so driven towards marketing for such a long time. It's amazing that they didn't make that move sooner.
That's a great call. I think really the main thing, I really like the home dark blue look, even when they went blue on blue. The road jerseys were awful, though. There's no defending that. I mean, just anything would have been better. They could have gone to orange and yellow, and it would have been an improvement over those road jerseys.
News 8 Sports with sports director John Kutchko.
I'll be honest, I'm not so sure about the new uniforms, but hey, if it gets into the playoffs, whatever.
Hey, at this point, you got to try anything. Anything. And this was held tonight, an event tonight, with a lockout going on. So there has not been a lot of buzz around the NFL to this point because of that lockout. Couldn't have any of the current players on the roster there. Yeah. But nonetheless, they threw a party tonight. The Bills holding an event this evening to unveil their new look for 2011, assuming there is a 2011 season. We can only hope. A little of the old mixed in with some of the new. Over 10,000 fans on hand at Ralph Wilson Stadium for the unveiling. A little pomp and circumstance. And Kevin, I got to admit, I like the white helmets coming back with the charging buffalo. I love that big charging buffalo logo. Like the home uniforms, the royal blue. I don't like the road uniforms. Too much white in my humble opinion. But nonetheless, they had the event there. And, one of the nice things, they had military personnel help unveil the jerseys, as well as some of the Bills legends like Jim Kelly and Thurman Thomas. But, well, you be the judge. I like the home uniforms, not big on the road. I said that, so we'll move on. But, hey, football season, hopefully, we'll get here.
For the first time since 1983, they're bringing back the white helmets, too. We forgot to mention that. So a very big change for the look of the Buffalo Bills. So right before the start of training camp, the lockout comes to an end. And that caps off an insane week where all of free agency and everything that goes into it, all the offseason workouts and conditioning, has to be condensed into 1 week. What was that week like?
It was the confirmation that Twitter was a fantastic invention because there was no...
At the time.
There was, different discussion. But There was no leaving. I wonder if that had happened in 2001, it would have been different. You'd have to, pay attention to TV updates and whatever. But that was the craziest NFL news offseason week that I can ever remember, because there were signings, there were releases, all that stuff that you would normally have over the period of mid-March to like late April happened in 7 days. And it was fun. It was, as much as the lockout was uncertain and nervous and what's going to happen to our precious football, that week was made up for it in spades. It was just awesome every day.
And then in that week of free agency, the Bills sign Tyler Thigpen to be the backup. They bring in Nick Barnett out of Green Bay, the Super Bowl champs. Brad Smith to be the decoy Wildcat. But the big news from free agency is they lose Paul Posluszny to Jacksonville. A guy that had some good moments but was injury prone. I wouldn't say he was a great Bill. He's more known for his time at Penn State. Thad, your interactions with Posluszny, what was he like, and your thoughts on him leaving in 2011?
A good, straightforward guy. Never afraid to talk to a camera. Never had a problem with him. I think at the time he was probably a little bit underrated. He was more of a lunch pail guy. He wasn't like Luke Kuechly. It's going to blow you away with big plays, or Von Miller or something like that. He is going to go out and make tackles. Be in the right gap, cover the right receiver for the most part. Not super athletic. So when he left, I think most people, considering the years that he was connected with, no one really minded to see him go. But he was a good player who has been continually a guy you can count on in Jacksonville since.
Yeah, and he's, like you said, he's still in the league, but I think generally Bills fans say he was a huge disappointment, because the hype for him out of Penn State was pretty big, and he immediately got hurt, and things never really were right. He was in the lineup, and then you always expected, when's the other shoe going to drop? When's he going to break another forearm or something?
Yeah.
How many bones can he actually break? It seems to be just kept going.
He never made that big, those big game-changing plays. He was always just going to make all the little plays and none of the plays that you talk about in the box score and the highlights later.
And you mentioned when Aaron Schobel retired that though no opposing offense game planned for Schobel, I can't imagine they did for a guy who plays 45 games over 4 years.
He was like the poor man there in Schobel, if you can even go there. Which isn't a bad thing, but yeah, there was no defense thinking, Paul Posluszny, we got to make sure we know where 51 is on every play.
And just how bad the defense was. I mean, he can be a pretty impressive player on the field, but when they're giving up the yardage they were giving up to LT and the Jets,
yes.
When they're giving up multiple 100-yard rushers on the same team in the same game, he can make 10 tackles, and you're like, well,
they're all 7 yards downfield.
Great. Yeah, he was in position when everyone else wasn't.
That was a part of it too. I think they could have lost anybody off that defense, and Bills fans have been like, okay.
The Bills lose some players off their offense in training camp as the Bills trade Lee Evans to the Ravens for a 4th-round pick, which, Evans is 30 years old. He's been with the team for 7 years. He's had a lot of crappy quarterbacks throwing him the football. Just to see Lee Evans, a guy that was an upstanding guy that would answer questions, go to a contender now, was there kind of a feeling almost like in the same way that Boston embraced Ray Bork when he was traded to Colorado because, he has a chance to win the Cup? Was there kind of a sense that, okay, Lee Evans, you're free now. you can go win with someone else?
I don't think at the time. I think at the time there was mostly surprise that the Bills made the move. Because this move, as it turns out, was made because the Bills coaching staff really loved Donald Jones and thought he could play that other wide receiver opposite Stevie Johnson. And, at the time, I was very surprised by the move. I disagree with it. I think looking back, considering Lee Evans was out of football in a year after this, that getting a 4th-round pick for that was an excellent move. But it was a big surprise at the time. That feeling that you're talking about, that came up when the Ravens played the Patriots in the playoffs, and Bills fans suddenly were in anybody but New England mode. And then it was, Lee Evans could go to the Super Bowl too. That'd be great. But at the time, it was all about Buffalo.
Yeah, it was not. There was not really a fond farewell for Lee Evans, who was very good at times for the team. And again, it's the quarterback, because it always is the quarterback. But the Bills have had these wide receivers that could play and obviously stood out. This seemed more like the rise of Stevie Johnson than anything, who became the number one and was dynamic. And they decided, trading for draft picks is a thing they seem to do a lot in this era. And fine, but it wasn't really it wasn't like this life-changing thing. So it's like, Stevie Johnson's team now. All right.
While Lee Evans was a productive 1st-round pick, someone that was not productive as a 1st-round pick is released 3 days later, Mr. Aaron Maybin. And say whatever you want about Paul Posluszny, Aaron Maybin is exponentially worse. I don't know if he's the worst pick of the drought. Maybe he is. Actually, now that Is he the worst pick, though? I don't know. I go back and forth on this. We've had this debate.
I will argue John McCargo just because they traded up. They made extra. He was worth more than one pick.
Yeah, Lossman, too.
Yeah, true. Lossman actually was functional for a little while. John McCargo was never that.
I don't know what scheme he fits at that size, unless you're a strong safety or something. He says his metabolism, and maybe that's what it is, but he couldn't hold weight. When you miss on a pick that high, it sets you back because you keep trying to fill that void. And that's the reason we took a little longer. We needed him, and we wanted him to come through, and we wanted to make sure we gave him every opportunity. It just didn't work out.
People still talk about Aaron Maybin. No one cares about Mike Williams, that it was a bust and it was terrible. Obviously, franchise put the franchise in such a worse state. Like that was the start of the drought. Really, is making that move, and just it didn't work out. But Maybin is someone that people still talk about today, and will talk about until they make the playoffs, and maybe forever.
I mean that's the thing is you think about the players that the Bills have had over the drought. Which players have elicited like the most visceral reaction from fans? Yep. Maybin is in that conversation with Lossman.
Yes.
I think it's those two.
Rob
Maybe
Johnson.
Rob Johnson. Yeah, but that was. I almost don't equate Rob Johnson
with the drought.
Yeah, even though he obviously was there for it at the very beginning, but
it was really visceral. I mean, you had this discussion. Yeah. I mean, 1 year of Rob Johnson might have equaled Aaron Maybin's entire career with Buffalo.
It just wasn't his fault though. Like that's the thing about Johnson that I've learned. You asked me what I've learned about the drought. That offensive line was so bad, and there were pieces that were in place for that team, and it was just managed poorly. And obviously, he did not play well. There's no question about that. But there were major concussion issues that nobody talked about really.
Because it was 2000.
Because it was the past.
Well, the other part of it, too, is not being his fault is exactly right. The reason his anti-sentiment was so visceral is because Doug Flutie was on the other side.
Exactly.
If there was a Doug Flutie that played the other defensive end or was picked right after Aaron Maybin, we'd be a different discussion.
Right.
Doug Flutie a different discussion. We could go for an hour on that. What if Doug Flutie played defensive end? Everybody loved him. Yeah.
All right, so with all of that said, we finally get into week 1 of the 2011 season. The Bills go on the road to Kansas City, Missouri. Special teams force a fumble on the opening kickoff, and the Bills have a spectacular afternoon. They go on to win 41-7. Fitz throws for 208 yards, 4 touchdowns, has a 133 passer rating. Fred Jackson, 20 carries for 112 yards. C.J. Spiller gets his first rushing touchdown. Everything goes well. Stevie Johnson has a touchdown, and some fellow by the name of Scott Chandler, who they signed at the end of the previous season, has 2 touchdowns in this game. First opening road win for the Bills since 1996. Week 1 could not have gone better.
Yeah. It was just one game, though. I mean, we've done this. We still had the 31-0 New England game memory. I mean, they'd actually won. It seems like they had won openers semi-regularly from maybe 05 to 11, 12, whatever, to where 1-0 wasn't, woo, let's throw a party. It was okay. We'll wait until the real Bills show up.
Yeah, the Dick Duran years where they lost in the openers, but other than that, they had pretty good showings, and you would get this early like, oh, okay, well that's interesting because it's not that the Chiefs were supposed to be amazing. It was just that they're a pretty decent opponent. They're great great at home.
Yeah.
You think that
you spank the Chiefs in Arrowhead, that's something.
Yeah, that's a test, and they passed it 100%, and then okay, well, keep going.
Yeah.
Well, the following week 2, the Bills at home for their home opener. They trailed 21-3 at halftime to the Oakland Raiders. The Bills rattle off 21 straight points. Fitz leads a fourth quarter comeback. David Nelson has a game-winning touchdown with 14 seconds left. The Bills win 38-35. Ralph misses the home opener the first time in the 52-year history of the Buffalo Bills. He is 92 at the time. But the Bills win 38-35. And this is a team in back-to-back weeks that has put up 35 points or more. I mean, we've seen hot starts. 08, 03, 02 with
the first Bledsoe year.
No, the first Bledsoe year they lost the
second Bledsoe year.
The second Bledsoe year.
Yeah.
So it was 03.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history you got to memorize with this stupid team. But yeah, so a 2-0 start with a lot of points from the offense. Just the thought after okay, they did it once, now they've done it again.
The thought was easy. The next game's against New England.
Yep.
Show us then. They really didn't. 2-0, great. New England's coming next week. Then we'll find out for real.
And they sure did, because in week 3, Pats led 21-0 in the second quarter. Welker and Gronk with 2 touchdowns. Fitz throws for 369 yards and 2 touchdowns. Fred Jackson, 74 yards and a score. Stevie, 94 yards and a touchdown. Scott Chandler, his 4th straight game with a touchdown. Drayton Florence has a pick 6 off Tom Brady. The Bills intercept Brady 4 times. They made it on the cover of Sports Illustrated again, just like after the 31-0 win back in 2003. The Bills win 34-31 as Lindell kicks a game winner late, I think as time expires.
Yeah.
Just, wow. In the sunshine, the 15-game losing streak to the Patriots is snapped. The Bills beat Brady and Belichick.
As I think we have mentioned more than once, I've covered every day of this drought.
Every single one.
Without ever covering any one of the playoff seasons. So from day one till now and continuing.
I'm sorry.
I know. It's a sad existence, but I make it work. I imagine that if the Bills ever did make the playoffs, the end of this game is how it would feel. Because walking off this field, it was a party. No one wanted to leave. Fred Jackson carried his son off, high-fiving fans. There were players, just running the outside of the stadium. The people were going crazy. It felt like the Bills made the playoffs because all the stuff we talked about with the first 2 games, like, okay, fine, show us next week. Okay, fine, show us against New England. Well, now this wasn't a win you question. This wasn't a game that you say, yeah, you won, but. This was a legit win. They had gotten down. They had found a way. Fred Jackson catches like a little swing pass, takes down to the goal line, and they kick a chippy to win the game right at the buzzer. Everything, drama, comeback, Patriots, home, 3-0. It had everything, and it was the best feeling after a Bills game, I think, bar none, for the existence of the drought, all 17 years. This was the game that felt, wow.
3 seconds left. Ryan Lindell, it's good. The weight is lifted off. The Bills with a stunner. 34-31, they end the streak. They're the only undefeated team in the AFC. John Kutchko, what a win.
It was a case of deja vu here in Orchard Park. Last week, the Bills were down 21-3 to the Raiders. Today, it was 21-0. But they fast become the Cardiac Kids, and the end result was an improbable victory.
3-0. Took out your boys, baby. We getting alive in Buffalo. Let's get it.
If you're going to be successful, you got to win tough ball games in hard environments against good football teams. And they're a good football team now. That's a good football team we just played.
There were probably very few believers in us going into this game, especially when we spotted them the points early. Anybody that believed in us was probably, on the edge. And we had so much belief, and we came back and scored the 10 points before half.
Right now, it's 3-0. I think that's what a lot of guys are focusing on. We know we just took a huge monkey off our back. Right now the most important thing I think coming out of that locker room is, we're 1-0 in the division.
We know in the previous games that we've played these guys, we've done a lot of beating ourselves. And so we just came in at halftime. We've been in this position before. We just had to line up and play and win the individual battles. Just take it a play at a time.
Nobody gave us a chance but these people in here, and we brought it home. Let's go.
The win today even brought out emotions from some of the Bills' Hall of Famers, like Thurman Thomas.
The Bills said all week they needed pressure on Tom Brady to force him into turnovers. Well, even without pressure, the Bills got turnovers, 4 of them. Maybe Brady had a bad game. Sure, they got a couple good bounces. But no matter what, the Bills will certainly take it.
For us to go out and get 4 turnovers, and I think we scored off of all of them, is, very big field position change. We were a little down early, giving up those seam routes to 87, but, guys honed in and played the techniques. And, the more we can do that and turn the ball over and get sacks on defense, the better we're going to be at the end of the game.
We had to mix up some calls and change some things up because he was shredding us early on in the game. So we just regrouped, talked to each other, said we got to win the one-on-one individual battles.
Things change fast. They do. They get a few plays and make a few turnovers. Before halftime, we're going in to score, and, they got – Brian Scott makes an interception on the sideline. They go down, score. You let them back in the game like that. A team that's explosive in the pass game like they are, and they took advantage of it.
Now the Bills will go to Cincinnati next week, and there's still a lot of season left. But right now, there is no goal, there is no dream that is unreasonable in Buffalo. At Ralph Wilson Stadium with the Bills, I'm Thad Brown.
It's the most joyous moment of the drought by far. And the anticipation leading up to that game was exactly what you said. Like, yes, they beat Oakland, they beat Kansas City, that's great. You have to beat the Patriots. Mm-hmm. If you're real, you beat the Patriots, and they did. And it was a stunning win because of how the game started. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
they were a mess, and then Brady's balls started getting tipped, and they kept catching them. And it's an amazing game in hindsight because, what happens next makes it feel, you start to see through it, and you're like, well, they had to intercept Brady 4 times to beat them.
Right.
There were all kinds of weird things that happened.
They scored a touchdown, and Fitz throws a ball up for grabs in the end zone and gets a pass interference call and gets them down to the goal line, which it should have been a pick.
They needed every single thing to go right to beat that team. But Chan Gailey outcoached the team. That was the only. I still can't believe that it happened, but because Jackson caught that ball, they get down to the goal line. People initially thought it was a touchdown. And it's a good thing that it wasn't, because they would have had time left to go down and score again. And so they have Fitzpatrick kneel at the goal line, run the clock down, and you don't give him any time. You give touchdown Tom no time to make things happen. And I couldn't believe it was happening while I was watching it, because they were actually doing what they should do.
Yeah,
they've had games in the drought where they've played pretty well in Foxborough and then things haven't happened. They've also gotten blown out completely, but there have been 3 or 4 games where things could have gone right if they got a break. They got every break. And then they actually executed it well. And you could not have been more excited about this team and where it was going. And I was at the game, and we bought tickets on a whim from a friend. And it's the best Bills game I've ever been to. And now I cover the team.
That might go double for me.
Right. And I feel no joy about the team at all. And I cover them, and it's very cut and dry. But you can tell when a game means something, and when it's exciting. And that meant it meant that this is happening. The team is good. They can score points. It's going to be okay.
In 17 years, covering this team has been filled with cynicism. You can't help but not feel that way. There have been 2 times where I've been on a field at a Bills game and not felt that way. Number 1 was when Nate Clements ran the interception back against Pittsburgh to take the lead in the 3rd quarter, and you thought they were going to the playoffs that year. And then after this game, where you're on the field and it's just a party. And whether you cover the team or not, and you try to be objective, you can't help yourself but get excited and feel and enjoy 80,000 people.
And it's a different story
crazy.
than what you've covered for years.
That also helps too. Yeah.
Let's go, man! Awesome, man! Let's go!
Following week, the Bills go on the road to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals, a team they've beaten 10 straight times. And you win by the comeback, you die by the comeback, because the Bengals just outplayed them with their rookie quarterback, Andy Dalton.
I remember immediately after this game's over, looking back and thinking, how did you not see this coming? All the emotion they had spent in the New England game. You go on the road against a rookie quarterback, so not much of a book on the guy, a team that has talent. A.J. Green's the receiver there at that point. How did you not see it coming? And granted, it wasn't a blowout. Cincinnati, they picked up a couple of calls late from reviews and officiating, and won on a late field goal. So it wasn't like they blew them out, and Buffalo they were up 17-3 in the game. So Buffalo didn't show up flat. Yeah. But you just felt like at some point the wind is going to come out of the balloon.
Well, Dalton played pretty poorly in the first half, and he looked very much like a rookie quarterback. And I mentioned him earlier because he turned it on. He realized that he had A.J. Green, and also Jermaine Gresham had a really good game for them. And that was, it was a sign of trouble, I would say, because you felt like things were going really well. And again, this is great. They're up again on the road. This is a team they beat
17-3 at halftime.
Yeah, and it's a team that they beat even when Cincinnati was good. When they had Carson Palmer, they beat them, and it's strange that it just for some reason things just went downhill there.
And you came out of that game. I don't think Bills fans were upset at all about, maybe a little bit, but I think after 2-0, you're thinking they would be 3-1. You just thought the wins would be reversed.
Right.
And looking back at it, if you were going to pick one game to win, you absolutely wanted it to be the division game and the Patriots. So 3-1, okay, fine. We're still 3-1 where we thought we'd be. We actually got a better win out of the deal. No problem. Let's keep going.
Week 5, the Bills are back home. They host the Philadelphia Eagles. Mike Vick is the quarterback of this one. And once again, turnovers turning into points for the Buffalo Bills. Nick Barnett has a 31-yard pick 6 off Mike Vick. Vick, 4 interceptions, a career high for him. Freddie, 26 carries, 111 yards and a score, 6 receptions, 85 yards. He looks like the MVP of the early part of the season in 2011. Brad Smith, the Wildcat gimmick quarterback, has a 12-yard touchdown. The Bills win 31-24. So the bad taste out of your mouth from Cincinnati is gone. The Bills are 4-1 with a win over the Eagles.
And this was the point where I started to think, how many defensive touchdowns are they going to get this year? How many of these things that you don't usually see happen, 4 interception games by opposing quarterbacks that are pretty good. It was good. Everyone was excited. They're still scoring points. But this was the game. I remember after the Barnett play, I'm like, all right. This is really what the formula is going to be for 16 games. This is what we're going to do all year. I mean, cool, 4-1, but this is not going to hold up. And then what happens?
If I'm not mistaken, this is the year that Bills Mafia starts, right? Isn't it?
Indeed.
That's the Nick Barnett acquisition that he says.
I think it is.
I think he says
guy,
it on Twitter, and that's the big thing.
What legitimized it? Yeah.
Bills Mafia? Have you guys heard of this Bills Mafia? It's this group of Bills fans, all on Twitter, all connected. And this thing, it's gonna blow up. Just ask the players.
Oh, the Bills Mafia is a movement, baby.
So I think it's definitely a perfect name for our fans.
Bills Mafia sounds like a more dominant, stronger group.
Check them out, the Bills Mafia.
Even you guys can be a part of it. It's free.
All you have to do, go to Twitter and search the Bills Mafia. But wait a second. How'd this whole thing get started?
It is a complete accident.
It began as an inside joke between 3 huge Bills fans on Twitter. Delmar Reed, Leslie Willie, and Breon Harris. Their goal was real, to unite fans and always stick up for the Bills players.
Now we have an identity. You know, the term nation is thrown around with so many different sports teams. I don't think anybody else has a mafia.
But for months, no one knew about it until the Bills players themselves saw how the fans always had their backs and embraced the new term.
On Twitter, I get a negative person, I just retweet it, and the Bills Mafia get after them.
Y'all better watch what y'all say. The Bills Mafia go get y'all.
With the players talking about it, Bills Mafia blew up. In 5 days, over 750 new followers had joined the movement. Delmar created a logo and a website, billsmafia.com.
There's people who have used this term from Germany, from Ireland, from Mexico City.
This whole thing sort of went from 0 to 60 in a matter of a couple days, and we're just sort of going with the flow right now.
That flow could bring the Bills Mafia together for a game in early October. You know, it'd be nice to meet all these fans in real life, including the other founder, Breon. Delmar and Leslie got a head start.
No, we actually just met about 15 minutes ago.
Corey Heppola,
yeah.
News 8.
It was a fun new thing. It was, again, social media being explored for the first time by a lot of us, especially in sports, and that was a big part of it. And I'm pretty sure you're right. Nick Barnett was the catalyst or the one that legitimized that whole movement. And it became, not everybody likes Bills Mafia, but I think for the most part, especially the things that Del Reed has accomplished is, in part because of that attention, I think it's something that has been generally received as positive. The jumping through the tables aside. So
yeah, Del has done really great things with 26 shirts and the origins of that, what it's become is very strange, and I think
it's morphed and shifted so many times over 6 years.
Yeah, but he's done really great work, and it kind of shows that the passion. I actually wrote about this, and I said it's the best possible result of watching a bad team is that you're doing something good with it. You're trying to you're trying to make the most of it, and there was legitimate excitement about that team that off season and this year, and it's we know what's coming.
Yeah.
maybe the viewer doesn't know.
Week 6, the Bills go on the road to the Giants. Fred Jackson has another huge game. Fred Jackson, oh my goodness, what a player. 16 carries, 121 yards, a touchdown for 80 yards.
Great run. One of my favorite all-time runs.
Fantastic run from Freddie. Fitz throws for 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 to Stevie Johnson, 1 to Naaman Roosevelt. Talk about a Bills Mafia folklore hero, Naaman Roosevelt. But Fitz has 2 interceptions in the second half, and we're seeing the Fitz that we now really know really starting to emerge as those breaks don't show up for the Bills in this game. Ahmad Bradshaw runs for 3 touchdowns. The Giants win 27-24. So the Bills go into the bye at 4-2. Okay, fine. Tuesday, October 18th, it's removed from this current 2011 Bills roster, but it's a seminal figure in the Bills franchise. Ken Hull dies at 50. To see, we've watched throughout the drought as the stars and the heroes from the Super Bowl era get older and a little grayer, a little doughier, but they were all still there. To lose Kent Hull, how big of a hit was that at that time?
It hurt. It hurt. He was, a central part of that team. No pun intended. I could say pun intended, but he was the center. And one of the things about that is passing during the bye week, I think it gave it more power, and I think deservedly so. If it had happened in the middle of 2 games, it would have been something we talked about Tuesday, Wednesday, and then there would have been a game coming up, and that would have been it. Because it had been during the bye, I think it allowed it to become something that Bills fans respected a little more. And again, it was appropriate that he got that kind of attention for his passing.
We now know the cause of death for former Bills great Kent Hull. He died of intestinal bleeding. He was only 50 years old. Hull played 11 seasons with the Bills. He was the center for those 4 Super Bowl teams. Hull was great friends with Jim Kelly. In fact, they both retired after the 1996 season. Well, today, Hull's former teammates and coaches talked about him, not only as a player, but what a great person he was.
He was a real unifying force behind,
guys, even in the locker room back when we played, it was between offense and defense, big guys, little guys, black guys, white guys, southern guys, northern guys, west coast, east. Kent had the real ability to reach across all those lines and make guys really love and respect each other.
The thing you could say about Kent Hull was I saw where Jim Kelly, said he was his best friend. Well, there was a lot of people that thought Kent Hull was their best friend. He just was that kind of guy.
I mean, he set the standard around here for interior linemen, and I guess this always happens, but I never really appreciated it and never did the due research till he passed about how good of a player he was.
So Friday, October 28th, there is some good news to report, at least for Ryan Fitzpatrick and his bank account, as he agrees to a 6-year, $59 million extension as the Bills are 4-2. Why are you making this move now?
Well, he had played well enough to where you'd think he'd be a term starter. I don't want to say long term, but it wasn't like they were like, maybe we don't have to look for a quarterback right away. And that contract averages a little less than $10 million per year. That's not break the bank quarterback money. That's kind of mid to maybe slightly above mid quarterback dollars. And he had been playing at a level higher than that. So if he had continued to play, and I'd almost say that with a straight face, if he had continued to play at that level, it would have been a bargain deal. And that was the argument for at the time. And they're 4-2. They're scoring points. Fitz is putting up number. And again, compared to what Bills had previously, the idea of let's not sign Fitz so we can go back and find another J.P. Lossman or Trent Edwards was appealing to no one. So I just gave you the pro argument for Fitz. The con argument was pretty darn obvious. This is Fitz, and why are we locking him up for $60 million?
Well, it sort of goes to the the idea of like, well, they're figuring it out, right? Like it's why I asked earlier. Well, they had a pretty good draft. They're obviously winning now. For better or worse, because there were very bad moments for Fitzpatrick, and they came up even in the wins. But they thought they had the guy, and like, okay, well, like that's the justification of it is like, well, they think this is the guy. This is organizing organizing the cabinetry. We got it down now. This is where he goes. We have this quarterback. This is going to be fine. And honestly, he really liked Buffalo, and that was a big part of it. I know right after that signing, I think he was in a Sports Illustrated article. They talked about these chili cookout things he'd do after after games, and it was like he this is our guy. We are going to embrace this guy. Warts and all.
It was more so than just numbers and wins too. I mean, this was the Amish rifle. It was Fitzmagic. It was all of the things that Bills.
He went to Harvard. Did you know that?
Oh yeah, that too. That occasionally came up. Yes, but it was all of the intangible things too. This was the most beloved quarterback since Doug Flutie during the drought. Yeah, and maybe certainly the second most to Doug. And he was a guy that connected to the Bills and their fans like no other quarterback had, and like many other stars really had not. So that was a part of it too. This was a galvanized the community type move, even if it didn't make a whole lot of sense football-wise in terms of his career and the money he gave him.
I'd probably be lying if I said that it's something I haven't even thought about all year. It's something you try not to think about, but certainly something that exists, that's in the air that I'm human too, so I can't just block all that away.
We're locking in a guy who we all like to play for and like catching passes from, and who we like leading our team. So I think it'd be a positive thing if we did.
You could tell in the way that people reacted to him how much they actually did like him, because when J.P. Lossman would make mistakes, they'd say, go back to wherever and disparage Tulane or whatever people would do. But with him, it was kind of like, oh well,
that's just how he is.
He's just trying his best out there. And like it's kind of like a rub his head with his knuckles and sort of like, hey,
it's okay.
Well, coming off signing a big payday, the Bills go north of the border to Toronto to take on the Washington professional football team. Thad, you were there for this one, as John Beck is sacked 10 times by the Buffalo Bills. The Toronto series has been a disaster. We all know that, and we know that the atmosphere has always been bad. But being on the field in the Rogers Center for that performance as the Bills blank Washington 23-0, what was that like?
It was an impressive shellacking. It was where the New England game was a party. This was this might be legit, because this wasn't a joke. This wasn't turnovers or interception returns for a touchdown. This was a beatdown. And it wasn't a beatdown. It was a beatdown in a spot where Bills fans didn't like, just because it was Toronto. It was still a neutral site environment. So there was a lot of coming out of that game. And unfortunately, the biggest was a hit that Fitz took late in the first half.
Yeah, I was going to say, just the fact that at that moment it seemed like, Fitzpatrick takes this hit I think on a pass to Freddie Jackson, and the rumors like, oh, he injured his ribs are hurt, he's got cracked ribs or something. And then like at least from what I gather, it seemed like it was kind of like a simmer and then became more of a story down the season. Then of course after the season when the Bills confirmed that, oh yeah, he played with cracked ribs the entire second half of the season.
Right.
And that, I mean, we talked about this a couple episodes ago when Trent Edwards suffered the concussion in Arizona and how he never was the same player after that. You can make the line of demarcation of Fitzpatrick was player A in the first 7 games of the season, and after this hit, he's player B. What was that like
at the time? He didn't really talk about it because he came right back in the game. He didn't miss any time.
And they win 23-0.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So there's nothing you didn't really talk about it until after the next 3 games because they get hammered 3 times in a row after this. To looking back and say, well, what's different? Well, maybe he got hurt in this hit that we all saw that looked really nasty, that maybe that did have an effect on him, maybe more so than even he realized at the time. Although, like you said, it turns out he knew exactly what had happened at the time. But no, it took a while, and the simmer analogy is perfect, before anyone really started talking about this as a season-changing event.
A little scary moment there, John, when London Fletcher got up underneath him and the entire Bills team, and I think all of Bills Nation was letting out a collective gasp. But he came back. He's a tough guy. He's the ideal leader for this football team, and they're where they should be right now, and they're in real good shape.
All right, you can read them online at rochesterhomepage.net. For Scott Petoniak, I'm John Kutchko with the Bills in Toronto.
There are very few times in the drought where the Bills are just the better team. Like you look at the schedule and go, oh, they're going to win that game. They're better than them. And you might not have thought that initially, but then you watch the game and like, oh well, they're definitely better than Washington. This is great. And then of course there's it's the tragic flaw in the whole thing is that in the game where they arguably play their best, the worst possible thing happens to them.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that like they go into a game thinking like, yeah, that's usually against the Jacksonvilles, the Cincinnatis, who they spanked for the first 10 years of the drought. And yeah, in this game in Washington for sure, they are the better team. Week 9. Things start to turn as the Bills host the New York Jets and Rex Ryan. Ralph Wilson in attendance for the first time in 2011. It is also the last time Ralph Wilson is in attendance at a Bills home game. Bills wearing their white uniforms at home for the first time since 1986. Fitz picked off twice. Fred has a fumble in that game. Jets dominate, win 27-11.
The thing about that game, and you talked about it, the last time Ralph appeared at a game, and not only is it something that you can look back and say, at the time, you knew that was a possibility. Because Ralph comes onto the field, and it's much early before, it's like 11:30 before the game starts. And he is on a cart, and he did a tour of the field, which is something that he did a lot, on his own, maybe when he was an owner, did it especially on the road a few times. This time felt different, to the point where, myself as a cameraman on the field, I was following him all around the field, thinking that this might be the last video we ever have of Ralph Wilson on a field, maybe even alive. And I think both essentially turned out to be true. So you knew how important that was, what a moment that was. It almost felt like Ralph knew it too, that he wanted one less tour around the field. And then unfortunately, the final score of the game is 27-11. It could have been 270-11 because the Jets just pounded Buffalo. And coming out of that, as much as you felt good about the Washington win, you felt equally bad about this loss. They didn't just get beat. They got manhandled on both sides of the ball. And quickly the doubts come in about, we can't play. We need to play 18 times better than this just to compete the rest of the year, let alone win the 4 or 5 games it would take to make the playoffs.
Ralph's relationship with the media is always interesting to me because I entered it. I mean, obviously, I became a media member after the fact. He's not, he's not a part of my experience with the team.
Same here.
So I kind of wonder, what was his presence like on there? Was it significant? I know that he would, talk to people after games. That's really the extent of what I knew from the outside as a fan. But he was around a lot. Like, did the players care about that? Did it matter to the organization?
When Ralph stepped into a room, everybody noticed.
Yeah.
And especially earlier in the drought, when he was still a little more with it and a little more of a guy who could have an impact just with what he said. When he came in the locker room, you knew about it. If he was going to talk, you needed to be ready for it. You needed to be ready with a microphone in case he did talk. When he was on the field, you knew where he was. You wanted to get some shots of him just in case something happened. Not that you're looking for something negative, but just when he was on the field, his presence was important. And you wanted to be there to chronicle it, whether it was in a locker room after a game or pregame, getting ready for a game.
Week 10, the Bills go on the road to Dallas, and you thought everything was bad in that Jets game. It's even worse in the Lone Star State. The Cowboys win 44-7. The first time the Bills play in Jerry World in the new Cowboy Stadium down there. Terrence Newman has a pick six of Fitz as he's intercepted 3 times. DeMarco Murray runs for 135 yards. You were at that game, correct?
No, I've not been to Jerry World yet.
Oh,
so,
I thought. Well,
Dave Yates.
I set you up thinking you had been there, but
not quite. But whatever. Yeah, it was not me. No, I did not see him. So this loss to Dallas wasn't the bad one. It was the next week to when the alarm bells really started to go with the Bills.
Yeah, and even before those alarm bells start ringing, Tuesday, November 15th, right after this Dallas loss, Eric Wood placed on injured reserve with a torn ACL. So now you have the anchor of both your offensive and defensive lines done for the year with 5-6 games left to go in the regular season. And then you get into Week 11, November 20th, in Miami. The Dolphins led 28-3 in the first half, and this game was never close. Dolphins never trailed. Dolphins win 35-8. So now in this 3-game stretch, you've had 2 beatdowns by division opponents, and the Bills have gone from 5-2 to 5-5.
Was it 109 to like 20? The total 3 games.
And then yeah.
So the Dolphins game was the one where you thought this team might not have any chance because, first of all, Dallas and the Jets were not playoff teams that year, and neither was Miami. But to do it a third time in a row, to do it against a division rival not named New England or not named the Jets, who were coming off 2 AFC Championship appearances at the time, was very disconcerting. And like you pointed out, it wasn't a slow beat down to where they scored a lot of points late. This game was over at halftime. This is the game, by the way, that I think led to Charles Clay becoming a Bill, because this was like the Charles Clay breakout game for Miami. He was great. I mean, he only had like 4 catches, but he had a 40-yarder on 3rd down, caught a touchdown. This was a game where Charles Clay first really dotted the NFL landscape.
And the injury bug rears its head again for the Bills coming after this game as Terrence McGee, Donald Jones, and Fred Jackson all placed on injured reserve. Yeah. So at this point, even though there's still 6 games remaining, the season's over.
Yes.
I mean, they're 5-5.
Yeah. Complete panic. Mm-hmm. And it's not even a sense of like, can they hold on? You can start to look back at like where they made mistakes. Like you should have beat Cincinnati, then you'd be one game up. Maybe you can make the playoffs then. I mean, it's 3 in a row like that was so crushing. And again, like you said, they weren't good teams either. Dallas was struggling to win in this gigantic stadium that they had. Like, and they just destroyed the Bills. Yeah. There's no chance.
And even if you had kept a lot of these guys healthy, they had lost by so many points. I think at this point they were getting exposed as a team. You don't think, well, if Fitz doesn't injure his ribs, maybe no. They probably would have been 7-9 at best this year.
And Fred Jackson at the beginning of the season looks, almost like perhaps an MVP candidate.
There was actual MVP consideration for Fred Jackson this season.
And then, and he's done with a broken fibula by Week 11. Week 12, the Jets welcome the Bills to the Meadowlands. Fitz has a touchdown to Stevie late in the first half. I just wanted to point this out because it's, Stevie.
Yeah. Yes.
Scores a touchdown late in the first half, pretends he's Plaxico Burress, who's playing for the Jets at the time, and pretends that he's shot. And he goes down, crumpled on the field, makes a big scene, 15-yard unsportsmanlike penalty. The Jets now have an opportunity because of the short field, and Dave Rayner, who's filling in for the injured Ryan Lindell, whiffs on the kickoff. The Jets recover at the Buffalo 36, and they score a touchdown with a minute to go in the first half. And all of you could talk about the errors that some of the Bills made because the team was thin at a lot of positions. These are unforced errors. This is a guy taking an unsportsmanlike penalty that he does not need to take at all, and a kickoff guy missing the football. Like, you're a pro. You don't whiff.
It wasn't a Dave Rayner thing. That was football karma pointing out to Stevie Johnson, you can't do dumb things like this and expect to get away with it. Because the Jets probably don't score points if Rayner hits the ball properly.
It definitely swings the conversation about Johnson, who people loved for a long time. And this is the
beginning of the end.
It's the beginning of the end. And I mean, right now, sitting here in 2017, that's amazing.
It's hilarious.
Like it's one of the things I forgot about, and I lit up when I heard you say this. I was like, oh yeah, he did that. That's awesome. But also, like it was a complete disaster in the game, and then it totally.
Outside of the game too, it was dumb and idiotic on multiple levels, not just for 15 yards.
I mean, like the Why So Serious game was the year before, and he's had other unsportsmanlike penalties after touchdowns, but this one you just go like, Stevie, that's great. Just don't do that in the end zone.
But he was trusted. Like they got rid of Lee Evans. He was trusted to be the number one. You assume that he's maturing. He's doing this now, and there was no real reason to do that. You don't need to do that. It's
years later. The Plaxico thing happened in 2008.
It was very stupid of me. You know what I'm saying? Going through that, and I feel like I cost our team a win on that. It cost our team 7 points, and I just got to apologize to everybody, talk to coach. You know what I mean? And I can't be doing that. I got to be more mature about the situations.
I don't think he's a bad person whatsoever. I think he's a good person. I think he has some bad judgment at critical times, and I got to help him get over that. We cannot have that, and it hurts our football team.
I would definitely not put that on Steve. I mean, Steve was having fun, man, enjoying himself, and that's what we need to do out here. Defense out there. Last drive, we had an opportunity to get off the field. We had like three third downs, and we could have easily got off the field, and we didn't do it.
We should have been up 7, but a stupid decision by myself led to a win for the Jets. That's how I see it.
Johnson said the celebration wasn't planned. He was just trying to have fun. But as he said when facing a firing squad of media after the game, I'm paying for it now.
That was the only thing anyone talked about in that game. Things happened in there. It was significant, but it was that moment changed the whole thing. And everyone's like, why? Why is he doing this?
Yeah, nobody talks about Mark Sanchez and his 82-yard game-winning drive in the fourth quarter.
No, yes.
That happened in this game. Yeah. No one remembers that. I had to look that one up.
Nice catch to Santonio Holmes. That was a great play by Sanchez. Yeah, it was right in front of me. I remember that one vividly.
Jets win 28-24, so the Bills and their hot start is now currently 5-6 after they've lost 4 straight.
They're DED dead.
Yeah, they stick a fork in them. They're done. The following week, the Bills come back home to host the Tennessee Titans. Game's blacked out, first blackout of the season. Titans win 23-17. The following Wednesday, December 7th, a date which is important to me because it's my first day at News 8. There you go. Hey. So yeah. The following Sunday, Week 14, the Bills in San Diego. I remember John Kutchko was at that game and thinking like, oh, we travel, we get to go to San Diego. Like, it's your first week. You don't get to go to San Diego.
Now, News 8's fifth quarter with Thad Brown.
And thanks for watching the fifth quarter. I'm Thad Brown, and tonight we officially welcome Prescott Rossi to the News 8 team. He comes to us by way of Bangor, Maine. He's an Albany native, and we're happy to have you here, man.
And very happy to be here. Let's get going. No time to chat.
That's right. Now that we've taken care of introductions, like you said, let's go back to work. Bills and Chargers both began the day 5-7. Chargers still had legit playoff hopes. The Bills can only play spoiler.
Oh, yeah.
A good story for sure.
Absolutely.
We're done tonight. Next week, like we said, Dolphins in town. John Kutchko and I will be at the Ralph for reaction.
And I'll be here with all the highlights from the Bills and the rest of Week 15. That's next Sunday on the fifth quarter.
For Scott, John, and our new boy, Prescott, thanks for being here, man.
One in the books. Many more to go.
Thad Brown, we're done for the fifth quarter. Have a great night.
Okay, fine. Chargers win 37-10. Bills officially eliminated from the postseason for the 12th straight year. And Week 15, the Dolphins beat them 30-23. Week 16, Tim Tebow. Tebow Mania comes to Western New York.
The Bills went back to work today with Tim Tebow and the Broncos up next on Christmas Eve. Here's Prescott Rossi with our Bills report.
Arguably, there is no more compelling athlete in the NFL right now than Tim Tebow, the quarterback of the Broncos, and he'll be here at Ralph Wilson Stadium on Saturday. For David Nelson of the Bills, it's a chance to catch up with an old teammate. The two played together at the University of Florida.
Same as any other week, whenever you have a good friend playing on the other team. Not only was he a teammate of mine, but he was one of my closest friends in college, and we stay in touch. And so it's just like any other friend, I want him to succeed until we play him.
Stopping the Broncos' unique offense will be a tall order for the Bills' defense. The Broncos lead the league in rushing, and only 3 teams in the NFL have given up more rushing yards than the Bills.
There's more option than you ever see from any other team. There's more quarterback run than you see from any other team. So you have to prepare for all of that, and that makes it different. It's the ultimate Wildcat package.
And finally, good news on the injury front for the Bills. Tight end Scott Chandler back at practice today. He's missed the last 2 games due to an ankle injury. Wide receiver Stevie Johnson did not practice today because of a nagging groin injury, but head coach Chan Gailey says they're just resting Stevie Johnson, and he should be ready to go on Saturday when the Bills host the Broncos. In Orchard Park with the Bills, I'm Prescott Rossi. Tebow scores the first points of the game as a rushing touchdown in the first quarter. Tebow then picked off 3 times, has a fumble return for a touchdown by Spencer Johnson. Jarris Bird has a pick 6 as well. Did we even shoot that game? Because it was Christmas Eve.
It was Christmas Eve. I actually had the day off, believe it or not. They gave me, I think, the only Bills day I've had off because it was Christmas Eve. The Bills were dead. I don't think we had a 6 o'clock show that day, so there was only really one late show.
I remember I anchored it.
Yeah.
It might have been my first. Yes. It might have been my first Sunday anchoring.
John went up there just to get some of the Tebow Mania pregame. That was it. I mean, it was such a non-event.
Yeah.
Really, Tim Tebow was the event for that game, and then that was the only game where Tim Tebow looked like what Tim Tebow should look like, which is a terrible NFL quarterback.
40-14, the final score from the Ralph. The losing streak is over. Too bad only 40,000 people were there, and the game was blacked out in Western New York.
After a win like this, especially since we've lost so many in a row, you you enjoy the victory, enjoy it in there with the teammates, and you take your hat off to the defense, special teams guys, and CJ, for his first 100-yard game. That was great to see today, too.
You don't belabor the point, but at the same time, it's kind of sitting there, in the back of everybody's mind. I didn't go out and say we got to have it, but at the same time, everybody knows you feel better when you have one like this, and we get one more opportunity, which is great.
I just remember sitting, in the sports office just around the corner, like, wow, they are embarrassing Tim Tebow, and then he doesn't lose until the AFC Championship game in the season.
Well,
so
divisional round, but
whatever it was. Yeah.
But I mean,
for over a month.
The 10 games from mid-season until the second round of the playoffs, that was the only time he didn't look like a miracle worker. That one game in Buffalo.
Yeah.
I actually, this is the first game I ever covered, the first Bills game I covered, because it was Christmas Eve and I just held a microphone for a camera in Denver. Yeah. That was it. And so I got to go, went on the field, did the whole thing, and I was really glad I did because it was amazing. because Tebow was so bad. And that Broncos team, let's set the record straight, that defense was incredible.
Yes.
The reason that he was winning those games is because the defense would allow 6 points, and then eventually they can kick 3 field goals.
Right.
They can make it work.
From 65 yards away too. Yeah.
And so, I'd gone from being in the stands for the Patriots game, which again, we said is the highlight of the 17 years that we're talking about here. But that game, the fans that were there, which is maybe 45, 50,000 people, loved it. But it was a very different feeling. It was jubilation for the Patriots, and it was, there is hatred for that team, but it was joy and success. This was definitely a dark, angry excitement about the fact that Tim Tebow was failing. Yes. And it was really strange to go from that, him playing so poorly, and then, you go down and do post-game, and he is just the media presence is real on Tim Tebow. He is charming and bright and always says the right thing.
We understand that every game's a big game. In the NFL, every team is good, and Buffalo Bills are a very good team, and you have to give them a lot of credit for the way that they executed and the way that they played. I don't think it was because our team, got proud about anything. I think we're the same team. We just didn't execute well enough.
And it was really strange to go from how badly that played and how everyone hated him in that crowd. And then he just goes into the media room and he kind of charms everybody. And he's like, "No, we're going to be fine." And then they were fine for a whole month.
Yes.
I was like, wait a minute. I had thoughts about Tim Tebow. I did not think he was a good quarterback. But I was like, wait a minute, is he doing it? Is he actually, I really thought wow, maybe I'm off here.
Well, and you talk about the anger sensed from the Bills crowd. And to me, I compare that maybe to the Rob Johnson game when he was with Washington the year after he leaves the Bills, and how badly the Bills fans wanted Rob Johnson on the field. Steve Spurrier gives them the raw meat that they want and throws Rob Johnson on the field. He gets sacked, and just the sound that the crowd makes from our low-angle video, from the broadcast video, you hear that elation from the crowd. And to me, I don't know that it's much different than how they felt, all these years later on Christmas Eve, as the sainted Tim Tebow gets brought down to earth hard with 3 picks and a fumble.
Well, and I think part of that is the fact that, people like Tim Tebow, and there were people that thought the Bills should draft him. Every team had a set of fans that thought that their team needed Tim Tebow because of, the superlatives that he had, because of the success he had at Florida. And I think a lot of fans that were there, and the season is a disaster. There's no question. What stands out to me are those 2 moments because, how poorly the season ended up almost taints that Patriots game because you thought it was real and you felt it and you allowed yourself to feel things, and then it wasn't real. It was a disaster. But that at least confirmed the fact that no, we didn't make a mistake in not getting that guy.
Yes.
It's that. Yes. That's the only thing we can take out of this season is no, at least that is fine. We'll let that fail on its own.
The other thing, don't let the Bills make you feel things.
Well, if the lesson is anything, yes, it's that. Don't ever love.
Week 17, the Bills go on the road to New England. The Patriots win 49-21.
Well, there's more. I mean, it's not just a game. I mean, that's the 21-0. That's the Stevie Johnson gets suspended game.
Yeah.
And so the Bills score up 21-0 this game. One of the touchdowns is to Stevie.
Yep.
And Stevie has a Happy New Year on his shirt, on his T-shirt. Gets a 15-yard penalty. He comes to the sideline. And in full view of all of us on the sideline, Chan Gailey benches him. Go sit down, audible. There was no doubt. There wasn't oh, Stevie's coming off the field.
What we said after we had an issue earlier in the season was if anybody got a penalty that hurt our football team for any type of demonstration, that he was out that game, and then we'd decide about the next game. I'm disappointed, and if it hurts a team, then I got to do what I got to do.
I got to respect his decision, you know, and he made it, and that's what it is, you know. Can't complain about it.
It happened last year. He put a message on his shirt and showed his shirt and didn't get a flag. And he does it this year and he gets flagged. Which one is it?
I didn't know it was going to draw a penalty. At the end of the day, you know, what I did is what I did, and I'll try to bring in like a new year. And ultimately, it hurt my teammates, and that's the thing that's hurting me the most. I'm not embarrassed to the world. You know, in this locker room, I feel like I let some people down, but embarrassed, I'm not embarrassed about it.
He's not a bad guy. He's not. He's a good guy. But he uses some bad judgment at times, and if you do that enough, it hurts the team too much. You got to do something.
So the Bills couldn't even end this disaster season without having a little disaster of itself inside the game.
And the Lions also make the postseason, so the Buffalo Bills are officially the team with the longest playoff drought in the National Football League. And this is in 2011.
Yes.
We still have 5 more years to go. So final statistics from the 2011 season as we put a bow on it. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 62% completion percentage, 3,800 yards. He threw the ball a lot. He threw the ball to the other team a lot, too. Led the NFL with 23 interceptions that season. Freddie runs for 934 yards in only 10 games, has 6 touchdowns. I mean, you really think about those first 10 games from Fred Jackson. Unbelievable how well he played. Really the peak of his career. Stevie Johnson goes for 1,000 yards receiving. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons for Stevie. And C.J. Spiller comes on in spell of Fred Jackson, 561 rushing yards, 269 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. The offense was better. I mean, they were a top half of the league offense. The defense, again, is poor, as 28th against the run in the NFL.
Defense was certainly the number one problem. The coordinator gets fired after the season, George Edwards. But the offense was the worry because you had just committed all this money to Ryan Fitzpatrick. Yeah. And even when the contract happened, there were the Dick Duran contract comparisons. Now they were, blaring from the rooftops of why did we give Ryan Fitzpatrick this money to see him, lose 8 of his last 10 or whatever it was.
Yeah, and so the Bills end the season 2011. So, fellas, just final thoughts on a year that obviously, as you mentioned, had such an incredible high with the win over the Patriots, and it ends in disgrace at 6-10 and another season without the playoffs. I think fans certainly thought that they got fooled again, right? And what was alarming, if you're looking at it critically, is how quickly it fell apart. There were injuries, sure. Some people got hurt. Jackson obviously was off to a great start. Fitzpatrick, was playing well when he got the contract. And then a couple things went wrong, and it's just gone. And how quickly it fell is really the thing that stands out for me. It's that I think this is the part of the drought where people really don't have any optimism at all. You really need to prove to them because they thought it happened. They thought it was going to happen. You thought it was going to happen. The media was on board. It was very much. There was a sense that something different was happening here, and no, it was not. So.
Not only quickly but spectacularly.
Yeah.
They're 5-2, and then 3 blowout losses, and then another blowout to San Diego. I mean, they got embarrassed in games immediately after starting and looking like they were going to have something this season.
Ralph Wilson is 93 years old. The Bills' lease with Erie County and Ralph Wilson Stadium expires in the summer of 2013, so a year and a half to go on the lease. The Bills have the 10th overall pick. So many questions need to be answered in 2012, and to that, we turn to the next episode of Down and Drought.